Hey there. I heard you had a run-in with Mr. Tall, Dark, and Scary. Is it true? Well, if so, I want to hear about it, and so does everyone else. So go on, send me an email with all the details. You can email me at contact@buckeyebigfoot.com. Hey there, everyone. Welcome back or welcome to Buckeye Bigfoot. I'm so glad you could meet up with me tonight for the ride down into Sasquatch Valley, or should I say up into Sasquatch Valley, because tonight is going to be a long journey. We've got to go all the way up into Alberta, Canada. So grab your snackage, get your booty in the saddle, and let's go. My moment with Sasquatch was brief, but it has left an impression on my life for over 45 years now, as it did with my father until his dying day. In fact, we spoke on this incident on one of the last of his lucid days before he departed this earth. Now, this might not be what you're looking for on your channel, and I won't be upset if you don't use it because it's not a screamer or a big headline, but I do want to tell it to someone. My experience with Sasquatch happened in 1979. I was 20 years old, and I was out with my dad. We were fishing and camping along the Athabasca River. I can't pinpoint the exact location on that river, only that it was about a day's north boating distance from Hinton. I know that because we stopped at Hinton for a few more supplies the day before this occurred. We had an aluminum john boat type of boat. We would fish all day. Sometimes we'd start in the morning, and other times we would do a lot of night fishing. We would go up the river and fish here and there. Then we would pull up somewhere and make camp for the night. Now, the night after stopping in Hinton, we pulled up and made camp, though like I said, can't tell you exactly where. We were both tired. We'd been out on the river all day. We stopped and made dinner out of the fish that we had caught that day, and we decided we were going to skip fishing that night and just get up early instead and fish at dawn. It was still early enough that we hadn't gone to our tents yet to get some sleep. We were sitting and talking, watching the fire. Suddenly, we heard a splash somewhere out on the river. It might have been across the river from the sound of it. We noticed it, and then we perked up when we heard a rhythmic water slapping. Looking out to the river from the campfire, we were looking out into complete darkness. But the slaps on the water were steady, and it seemed to be coming closer. It had the sound of someone swimming. My dad got out his spotlight and flipped it on. He turned it out onto the water. As soon as he did, the sound stopped. He panned back and forth, but he couldn't see anything, and after a while, he turned it off and sat back down by the fire. But he no more sat down, and the slapping sound started all over again, but this time louder and faster. We both jumped up from the fire then. Dad put the spotlight back on the water and panned all around. Again, soon as the light came on, the sounds stopped. We walked over to the boat and checked to make sure that it was secure. Standing by the boat, Dad panned the light again, but this time he panned down the other direction. He stood there and panned back and forth along the water and the shore a few times. There was something we saw sticking up out of the water. Looked like a big coconut at first, but there was also a flash of something dark. Then a second or two later, we could see little slits of black. We were just getting the idea that the coconut in the water had eyes, and it didn't like the light, and that's when it went under the water and disappeared. "Where did it go?" I asked Dad. Dad shook his head. He was just as perplexed as I was. He said, "I don't know." He was shining the light everywhere. The reason we chose that place to pull up along the river was because it seemed like a natural landing along the bank. You know, a lot of that stretch of the Athabasca, it's not easy to come in off the river. Some of the banks are pretty high. Some are loose and rocky and dangerous. But this spot was open and only lightly sloped with little to no vegetation at the front. Well, it turned out we weren't the only ones who liked that area for just that reason. When Dad walked a few feet from the boat and panned the light farther down the shoreline of the waters, the coconut was back. And those black things in the light, they were definitely eyes. At that moment, it was approximately 10 or 12 meters from the bank. It was moving at a good pace, and in just a couple of seconds, it was rising up out of the water. In about 10 seconds, it went from squatted in the water to a full height of at least 2.5 meters tall. I had the thought then that it was like watching Godzilla rise up from the ocean. I know that was a stupid thought, but it's one that I remember thinking. It looked over at us for maybe a second and a half as it came out of the water. It looked over at us in a way that seemed to say, "Don't even think about it, humans." Well, I'll tell you honestly, we definitely were not even thinking about it, whatever it was. Now it came all the way out of the river, onto the flat part of the bank, threw us that look, and kept walking into the woods behind where our camp was set up. Now, all said and done, we had our eyes on it for maybe 30 seconds, including seeing it on the far side of the boat as a coconut in the water. I asked Dad if he'd ever seen one before. And now here's the thing. I couldn't even say what I knew it was, and neither could he, it seemed. Dad looked at me, shook his head, and said no, but he had heard enough about them, mostly in his younger days. He said back then he took that kind of talk and those kinds of stories to be nothing more than scare tactics, trying to keep him and other young men like him from venturing and exploring. Not that it worked, he said. I asked him if we were in danger. We had one rifle with us, just in case we ran up against wild bear or moose. Well, because, it's Canada, and you just didn't know. Dad said he wasn't sure, but it was best if we act as if we were in danger. We won't regret that, but we might regret not acting like it. It was around 10 p.m. when this happened. I know, because we gauged the little firewood that we had, and we knew it wouldn't be enough to get through to morning. We quickly discussed some options, one packing up and getting in the boat, and just floating in the middle of the river until morning. But that was not a good option for a lot of reasons, not the least of which was Coconut Head, as we had taken to calling him, had shown us he had no problem swimming the width of that river. Now that really only left us with one option. That was to stick it out. But we had to get more firewood to do that. So we scouted up and down at the edge of the dense forest, but we never ventured in. Dad kept the spotlight on me and kept the rifle handy as I collected anything and everything that I could. Turned out we didn't get much, but with careful planning, we kept it going until morning. The sky was still a light blue in the morning, and it found us packing the boat. We had taken turns all night, sleeping and watching, or so we said. Truth is, I don't think either of us slept much. But it was quiet that morning, and all night. There hadn't been a single peep out of the forest. No breaking branches, no weird yelling or whistling, and no more visits from Mr. Coconut Head. And the sky was finally pink as we pushed off from shore later. It was only with the morning light that we saw things we hadn't seen or hadn't noticed the night before. We had been so focused on where we were going to pull up and make camp that we hadn't looked too much after that, and we should have. Across the river from where we were was a shore bank that was less rugged than the other stretched before and after it. Now, that bank wasn't as level as ours, but it was noticeably different from the rest of the banks. There was also a very worn-down area on that bank. Call it a path, if you will. And behind that, where the forest grew dense again, there was a visible parting of the heavy brush, hinting at a trail used by animals heavily, and probably used by other things, like coconut heads. As we pulled away, we looked at our camp area with a more critical eye, and we saw a similar opening down from our camp. Well, you know what? That was exactly where Mr. Coconut Head had gone. The day before, we had been so tired from being out on the river all day, and we were just looking for a nice area to camp. How on earth we missed all the signs, we neither one ever knew. My dad in particular was a very experienced woodsman, a hunter, and a fisherman. We scouted before we made camp, and we saw no predator scat or anything indicating bedding areas for any animals. But somehow we both missed that opening in the forest and another well-used landing maybe 10 or 12 meters south of where our boat was pulled up. You can go ahead and call us stupid or amateurs, and you would probably be right about the 20-year-old me back then. But you would be dead wrong about my dad. Again, it's also true that even the best of us can miss something important sometimes. I think we were both just so tired and worn out, and because we'd never had the slightest trouble anywhere on the Athabasca for years, well, we weren't as diligent as maybe we should have been. I am sorry that I can't pinpoint more of exactly where this happened on the river. There were no GPS functions back then, and we didn't really use a map. We were staying on the river that we had fished literally probably hundreds of times. I asked my dad about this one of the last times that we talked before he passed, and he still would not call it a Sasquatch or a Bigfoot or any other name. It was always Mr. Coconut Head. When we did talk about it, we always talked about how large and tall he was. It was inevitable. It seemed to take the whole topic. And it's really hard to make the size impression of what it really was with mere words, but I will try for you. The height was north of 2.5 meters, easy. We didn't stop to measure the branches where it had walked into, but in the morning I had to jump, and I could barely touch with my fingertips the lower branch that was right at its head height. I think I was about 175 centimeters at the time, so you do the math. Its width and overall physique was frighteningly well muscled, and those muscles were clearly seen when it walked out of the water. All of its fur was wet and slicked down. Now, if you've ever bathed some fluffy animal and you realize they only look so big and fluffy, well, because of their fur, and once you get them all wet, they look ridiculously small, like a little guinea pig or something, well, that was not Mr. Coconut Head. With all the fur slicked down and stuck to his body, it did nothing but define the muscles all the more, working as he walked. Nothing was hidden. Everything was visible. He looked more muscular and more terrifyingly strong wet than any supposed pictures of a Sasquatch I've ever seen. If you think they look scary, strong, and muscular in all the pictures and video that are out there on the internet now, I challenge you to try to picture one wet. Because guess what? Those muscles really stand out. And that's scarier than some fluffy-looking Sasquatch. I can't give a real guess on the width of its body. I have been asked that before. I saw it from the side and then at a bigger angle as it came out of the river and walked away from us. But what I saw, I'll guess, was at least 2 men wide at the shoulders, and those shoulders were very rounded and rolled forward in the socket area. The torso was longer and made up more of its height than its legs. It had a face, of course, but I really can't tell you much about it. I never saw it front on or close enough to tell you much other than it had eyes and presumably a nose and mouth and all the other things. I only saw the eyes because they kept closing and squinting shut because of the light, and those eyes looked dark, but that could have been just the light. We did see footprints in the morning when we looked in that area, but although we both had tape measures, we didn't stop long enough to measure them. But our memory collectively is they look to be about 40 centimeters, plus or minus, and it's probably in the plus range. The weight was somewhere in the 325 to 350 kilogram range. It could have been even heavier. It's hard to gauge. Now that incident, brief though it was, affected me and my dad deeply, and it affected us every day since it happened. It was important enough that my dad and I went over every little detail again, reliving the night moment by moment, in one of the last times that he felt strong enough to talk at all. I don't know if he wanted to go over everything again so that I would have a firm memory of it, or if he wanted to relive it and have something to carry with him as he made his great exit. I guess I'll never know. Thank you, Nance. I am most appreciative if you took the time to read this. Hello to the Sasquatch. I'm a new member. Thanks for letting me in. Signed, Brian Anderson from Calgary. All right, well, thank you so much for that email, Brian. I am sorry that you lost your father, but I'm glad that together you guys had an incredible moment to share. I found a lot of interesting details in your email, so thank you. All right, listen up, Sasquatch. I only have a couple things that I do want to share with everyone quickly. First is that the Spirit of the Bigfoot Festival is being held again this October 24th and 25th at the Mercer County Fairgrounds in Salina, Ohio. Now, last year it was in Greenville, but it's in Salina this year, and I think it's grown quite a bit. I will be there, and it's never too early to go ahead and get your tickets. So I'm going to put a link to the festival in the video description below, or you can look it up by going to www.bigfootfestival.oh.com. All right, everyone, I hope to see you there. Now, here's the second thing. Well, listen, I haven't done a live stream in 2 years. I've had a few of you ask. Think about that, 2 years. I don't know. Anyway, I figure it's about time. So go on and mark your calendars. April 11th, we're going to do it. We're doing a live stream. So go on and send me any questions you have for me, and we'll do that fun thing again. I do like the live streams. They're a little fun, but I never quite know what to say. So you guys help me out. Send me in some good stuff. But there's another point to that live stream. There's a new Bigfoot story narrator who's about to make their debut. And I know that all of you seem to be always eternally hungry for more Bigfoot stories, aren't you? Well, if you are, be sure to show up that night. And you're going to hear all about this new channel. And no, it's not me. And you can ask that new channel person with Bigfoot stories what their plans are. So be sure to mark your calendar for April 11th, and I'll let you know what time. And then show up, bring your A game, and let's welcome this narrator into the Bigfoot world. Well, they're kind of already here, but they don't really do Bigfoot stories. So anyway, they're getting enough together that they're going to start their own. I encourage them to please do this. So, well, I'm going to hush. You all just show up on April 11th, okay? I'm looking forward to it. Well, that's all the chit-chat that I have for you tonight. So let's go ahead and mark this one in the books as done and closed. Until we meet up again, please always remember, absence of proof is not proof of absence. Thanks for listening.